Hey party people, this is the next video in my How to Study Fashion Design by Yourself series. And we went over what books you need, we went over which videos you should watch and in what order and which playlist, etc., etc. I'll link those in the description box below. This video, we're going to go over the bare minimum art supplies you need to study each subject. And so this video is going to be broken down subject by subject, like what materials you need to study fashion design, what materials you need to study pattern making, etc., etc. All right? And I love all those videos about these 6 gadgets will make your sewing life better or things like that. And I love art supplies, y'all know that, but this is not that. Okay, so don't come at me in the comments like, you forgot this though, you forgot that. This makes my life so much easier. I know there's so many tools like that and I love them and I probably own like 2 of each. But this is for the bare minimum of what you need because it can get overwhelming to buy so many things at once. You got to keep in mind when you see how much stuff I have been buying tools for studying and working for over 20 years. And some of that is I've just been buying things expressly to test them out to see if they're good or not, to tell my students about it. So I have more things than just like one regular person needs. So do keep that in mind. So don't get overwhelmed by how much stuff you're going to see. I'm going to tell you what you need and some brand recommendations, but this is what you need. And yeah, it's still going to be a lot, I know, but narrow it down to the subjects that you're going to study first and kind of break it down. And yes, I did time this video. So for those of you who do celebrate Christmas, maybe you can put these things on your Christmas wish list, maybe, or you can ask for a gift card to the stores that sell this kind of thing where you live, things like that. First up, fashion design specifically. So the first thing you're going to need are pencils and pens and paper. So this is what I use the most. These are 2 mechanical pencils, one that has kind of a thick lead, 0.7, and a thinner lead, 0.5, and a sticky eraser. And these are all from Pentel. And these are just a regular, very inexpensive office supply store brand. This is not fancy. I mean, obviously, not every brand is going to be available everywhere, but just keep in mind, like, these are very cheap. You don't need something fancy for just sketching, quick design sketching. And if you don't know the difference between quick design sketches and fashion illustration, I have a video about that. Click in the description box. But I have a thicker one and a thinner one, just kind of my preference on how I like to do things, and an eraser, the end. I know a lot of you have probably seen me use this Mono Zero Tombow eraser that's very, very skinny. I use this for fashion illustration. This is not a necessity. It's really nice. I love it. It's not a necessity. It's a luxury. I have these disco balls. They used to be cocktail holders I got at a conference goodie bag once, but I don't drink cocktails. I don't drink. And I thought this would be cuter to hold my art supplies. Ta-da! I just buy refill lead. Don't buy more pencils. Just buy refill lead. Here's the lead, HB, and here's the size, 0.7. Just buy the correct one. That's it. I have 2 top picks for pens. And again, these are just very inexpensive office supply store finds. This is the Bic Atlantis Exact in a fine point. This is a ballpoint pen. And this is the Uniball Signo gel pen. So whatever you like, gel pens, ballpoint pens, these 2 are bomb. And the kind of pens I like, okay, for one, they have to be lightweight. These weigh nothing. Yeah. They need to be lightweight, and the pens need to just glide across the paper like an Olympic figure skater on ice. I write really fast, I draw really fast, and I write and draw a lot, and I cannot have a scratchy pen in my way. I will get annoyed immediately, and these are just so slippery, smooth, fantastic. For those of you who want to slap a little color onto your design sketches, markers are the way to go. They're the fastest way to work for fashion designers. If you like this box, it's an infinite divider system. I just want to show you one of my marker boxes to show you that I use lots of brands of markers. People are constantly asking me what brand I like. I like a lot of them, okay? I like Prismacolor. Prismacolor makes a very good chisel tip. It has a nice soft chisel tip, and it makes a brush tip. And I like Copics. I prefer these. These are brush tips, and the pen barrel is nice and small instead of the fat square ones. I don't like those very much. These are Touch, not the Touch 1, Touch 5. There's like lots of knockoffs. I only own the regular Touch markers. The black barrels are the chisel and skinny point, and the white ones are brush tip and chisel. And I prefer the brush tips, but whatever. I wanted to try them out, so I have both. But these are also really great. These are discontinued, whatever, but of course I'm just going to use them until they dry out. These are Marvy lip plumes. These are nice. These are chart pack markers, and these are so full of liquid that these are really great for covering lots of surfaces, like if you're doing big old ball gowns. And they have the best chisel tip. Very sharp, but also very wide, so you can do skinny areas and wide areas. Okay, so I use a lot of brands. Don't get so caught up on that, okay? Just the colors that I recommend, one, get a few that are good skin tones and get a few that are good hair colors. Some of those will intersect. Get black and get colors that match the fabrics that you're designing with. It's always directed by fabric. Fabric is king. I don't know how often I need to say it, but in fashion design, fabric is king, okay? You learn to use the fabrics and it helps you become a better designer. You match your colors to the fabric that you're using and all those things, okay? So that's what the marker collection I have, you know, the colors are really based on what fabrics I've been using to design with over the years. And then this is my skin tone and hair set. If you want to know more about that, then you can watch my skin tones video, which is in my faces playlist. Let's talk about paper. I just use cheap office paper. This is 30% recycled, 20-pound regular photocopy paper from Office Depot. Again, not fancy. And many of you know that I like to use pre-done templates so that I'm designing very quickly. And you can buy my templates online, shop.zoehong.com, and then make multiple Xerox copies and just sketch right on top. I do that a lot. Like most of the time, that's what I'm doing. So no fancy paper necessary. If you prefer drawing in a sketchbook, if you're like always on the go and you want to have all your sketches somewhere, or if you are looking for something to do your sketchbook development for your mood board and for inspiration development, here is a good sketchbook. It's hard, okay, so that you don't have to sketch on a table. You don't have to look for a table. I can just sketch on my lap. These are the kinds of sketchbooks I use when I'm traveling. Definitely a hardcover. Now, this paper is not great. It's thin paper. It's very close to the photocopy paper, but I like to print out my crookie, my figure templates, and slide that in there and just use the template to sketch. Can you see? It's easy for me to see right through this very thin paper. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but then I just draw right on top. And you can use a flats template, you can use a figure template in whatever pose you want, whatever, and you're just sketching really fast. Because remember, this is about just really fast getting your ideas down on paper, not about gorgeous illustrations. Sometimes I would photocopy other sketches and I would put them together to create another outfit, like re-merchandise the pieces. That's what I was doing here. This is another decent choice. Anything with like mixed media paper. If you're going to be doing a lot of collaging and, slapping paint and cutting and pasting and scribbling and stuff, mixed media paper is a good choice. This one is from Blick, but, Canson makes a really good one. Lots of brands make them. So, see, very versatile for wet and dry. Mixed media paper. This one is too big to carry around. It's very big. It's 11 by 14, but there are smaller ones. So eventually you're going to create portfolio projects, design projects, and you're going to upload them onto your website, but you're going to want hard copies of everything to take with you to interviews and just to have on hand. So you're going to need a book. These are Itoya brand portfolio folders. You see that? And they come in many different sizes, and they're just basic black folders. And this is holding some of the things that I put together for the book. This is actually from a video, but they're top loading, and it comes with a little black paper backing. And you can put and they come in a lot of different sizes, so you can use this. Next subject is color theory, and for that you're going to need a color wheel. I have a whole playlist called Color Lessons, and I suggest you go check those out before you start buying stuff. But I use 2 different color wheels because I use 2 different methodologies depending on what it's for. For mixing paint colors, I use the CMYK color wheel. And for design and creating color palettes, color stories, I use the red, yellow, blue color wheel. And so pick up some color wheels. And if you really want to deep dive into color theory and learning colors and where they come from, the number one way to do that is to mix your own colors. You need to get some paints, gouaches preferably. Gouache is the classic old school art school way of studying color. In color theory class, we make color chips ad nauseum with gouache, and we experiment with different colors and make different value scales so that we can understand what it really means when you add a little bit of blue to yellow, and then you add a little bit more blue, and what it means when you add a lot more blue, and what it means when you add blue and then a black to yellow. Like, you have to experiment with all of these color combinations in order to really understand the undertones of a color and what goes into a color and how you can effectively match colors to each other. That's why color theory for fashion is something that all fashion majors take, whether you're styling, journalism, merchandising, they all take it because everyone in fashion needs to know about color. A little sneak preview of the book, I go over, how to experiment with a color. This is just red violet. And this is what happens when you start adding red violet to stuff. Here's red violet with white. Here's red violet with a light gray, with a medium gray, with a dark gray. And so when you actually start mixing these colors together is when you really understand how colors work. This is red violet with its opposite of the complement, which is yellow green, and what happens in between this and this as you mix them together. Okay, so what you really need is to get some gouache and some paper and start mixing and color swatching and then writing down the color combinations to really understand color. That's really the best way. Tech design basically is all about learning how to do tech packs. And yes, I have a tech packs playlist, elements of a tech pack. Most people, like small companies, they use Microsoft Excel or any kind of similar program to do their tech packs. And then larger companies, they buy expensive, fancy software made for them to do their tech packs and similar things. Okay? So learn Excel. I sell tech pack templates, so you can pick those up You can create your own tech pack templates by following my tutorials here, like the video tutorials. You need to be able to make flats in Adobe Illustrator. And so I have videos on those. Adobe Illustrator, you have to get. And listen, people ask me all the time, what's the free version? Can you suggest to me something cheaper? Here's the deal. I guess free ones exist, I guess cheaper ones exist, but the industry standard is Adobe Illustrator. If you want a job in the industry, they will ask you if you know how to use Adobe Illustrator. And that's why I tell students to learn expressly Illustrator so that they're prepared for the job market. When I hear down the pipe that they are like, oh yeah, you can also use this, or they're also looking for that, I'll let you know, but I'm not going to suggest software that the industry is not using or looking for in job applications. And then you're going to need a measuring tape. Just get a cheap one so you can measure bodies with it for fittings and stuff. So you can measure bodies, measure clothes. I like this one because it has metric and imperial system. For those of you who want to study figure drawing because you want to create your own figures, all you need is cheap drawing paper and pencils and erasers. And if you are taking like a local figure drawing class and you've got those big drawing boards with the clips and you need huge pads of paper to do gesture drawings, just get newsprint. That's what all the art schools use for practice. Newsprint is the cheapest version of all those big drawing board papers. It really is like newspaper paper. It's super thin. It's not even fully white. It's like this grayish color, but it's great for practice. And a lot of people, they use soft pastels. Some people use charcoal pencils. Whatever the class you're taking, go ahead and use that. But, it's just practice. So don't splurge on anything good until you start thinking about doing final work. You know what I mean? If you want to learn my 4-step process to figure drawing that I have in my female fashion figures and my male fashion figures playlist, you're going to need some tracing paper. You can get the stuff on a roll. You can get tracing paper on a pad, whatever you want. And the brand doesn't super matter, although I don't love Canson tracing paper. Canson makes a lot of great paper. Their tracing paper is a little too plasticky for my taste, and it smears the graphite too much. But get tracing paper, and you're going to need a graph ruler. And get a graph ruler because you're going to use it for pattern making. You're going to use it for making flats. Flats is the only kind of drawing where you literally use the ruler to draw. And you're going to use it to kind of plan out your figures in my 4-step process. This used to be my favorite because it has both metric system and imperial system, but this is 100 years old. Look how yellow it is, and you can barely read the numbers. So I did get this newer one a few years ago. This one is only imperial system, but you can actually read the numbers. So I got this one. Get an 18-inch one, and you'll use it for almost everything. While we're talking about rulers, let me just tell you one more ruler that I use frequently. This is a metal ruler with a cork backing. I bought this in college. It's so old, but it's still perfectly pristine. Okay, you just take good care of it. And this is what I use when I want to use an X-Acto knife to cut and trim fabrics for swatches from our portfolio, papers, anything that I want to use an X-Acto knife. You want to put that blade next to this metal, and you want this cork to really grip your table. You can't move it. They also have ones that are rubber on the back as well. Those are also good. But let me tell you, this moves like crazy. If you try to use an X-Acto knife against this kind of ruler, it's only a matter of time before you slice one of your fingers. So you can pay for this ruler, or you can pay for an emergency room visit, one or the other. Let's talk about materials you need for fashion illustration. Pick a medium. Mostly I teach marker, gouache, and watercolor pencil. For marker, you know what you need. You need markers. I already talked about that. This is my favorite marker paper, Bienfang. There's a lot of great marker papers out there that are similar. Remember, marker paper has a right side and a wrong side to the paper, so always test that before you get started. And some people don't like marker paper because it is very thin and flimsy, but I always just use like a cheap Bristol for backing. I use the same pencils I mentioned before to do outline work and to do detail work. If you watch my fashion illustration tutorials, then you know that I use a lot of colored pencils purely for texture and detail work. And again, just like the markers, I don't have a brand preference. I buy according to the color that I need. So you will see in here, I have a lot of brands, and I have literally 30 food jars that I use to organize all of my art supplies. Here are my paints, like they're all in food jars. And so I have a lot of different brands here. Some of them I bought just to test. A lot of them I use because I needed them for the fabric that I was rendering. But you know, Faber-Castell Polychromos is fine. This is Soho Urban Artist Color Pencil. This is a nice brand. This is Tombow. It's kind of scratchy. It's not my favorite. Prismacolor Premier is vibrant and pigmented and smooth. There are some color pencil artists who do only color pencil that don't like how Prismacolor tends to bloom. But us fashion illustrators who just use it for little detail things, it doesn't really concern us. Lyra Polycolor is awesome. Oh yeah, Caran d'Ache Luminance 6901 series are beautiful. Man, if I had the money to splash out on a kit, like I could buy them, but I don't use color pencils enough to splash out on my own. You know what I mean? But yeah, this is a great brand as well. But again, like my markers, I organize them by color. So here are all my warm colors. I have a separate jar full of cool colors. I have one that's all white because I'm always looking. This is my white whale. This is my Moby Dick. Finding the perfect white color pencil. All right, let's talk paints. I prefer tubes over pans, okay? Because you can mix the right color you need more easily if you just squeeze paint into palettes than trying to mix stuff. I have this for traveling. I love taking my painting kit, traveling, and just painting all over the place, especially when I'm waiting around at airports. So this is great if you travel a lot, if you're on the move a lot, if you love sketching while you're on the move. Otherwise, if you're just doing work in the studio, tubes are the way to go. These are watercolor pencils. This is my favorite, Inktense. They're ink pencils, whatever. They're basically watercolor pencils where they go on dry and then you use water to activate them to create different textures and things like that. So this is another kind that you can use. And these are inks. Okay, they're watery. They come in these bottles. It's got the squeegee droplet thing. Okay, so you can try inks. This is tube watercolor. Okay, so gouache is opaque watercolor, which I prefer, but you can also use just regular watercolor. And again, I prefer tube over pan for ease of use in the studio. As I mentioned before, when it comes to paint mixing, I use the CMYK method. I use cyan, yellow, magenta, and black as the base for most of the colors that I use. So what I would start with is CMYK. So cyan, I'm going to show you my color chips. I make color chips for everything. So I have an inventory of what I have and what I need to not buy in the future. So cyan, and this is going to be different according to what screen you're watching this from, but cyan is really close to this Winsor & Newton Phthalo Blue Gouache. It might look too blue on your screen, but this is really close to the perfect cyan. This is Winsor & Newton Cotman Watercolor and Cerulean Blue. That one's kind of close. Turquoise is too turquoisey. This Cerulean Blue is dirty and chalky, and I decided I don't love it. And it was especially sad because this is a series 4 color, meaning it was expensive. This is Winsor & Newton Primary Blue, which is close, but still more blue than cyan. This is Talon's Cobalt Gouache. Again, closer to the phthalo blue than the primary blue. So those are some options for you there for cyan. For magenta, my favorites are the Winsor & Newton Rose Tyrian and the Talon's Permanent Rose. This is the Winsor & Newton Cotman Permanent Rose, but this is a little too reddish. Okay, it's getting into red territory. These are really, really close to the magenta you want. And for yellow, go for the purest, lightest yellow that you can find. Some of these are a little bit orangier. Okay, you want something that you can add cyan to and get like really pure greens. And so I like anything lemon yellow. This is Winsor & Newton Lemon Yellow Gouache, Talon's Lemon Yellow Gouache, Winsor & Newton Cotman Watercolor Lemon Yellow. See how yellow they are, and these have like a little bit of orange in them. Yellow. Let me say yellow so many more times. Yeah, here are my black swatches. So ivory black, Holbein ivory black. Those are good, rich, solid blacks. I like those. If you have a few more bucks, I would recommend a burnt sienna and a burnt umber to get you started on skin tones and hair colors. And I have a skin tones color mixing video in my faces playlist, but these are all burnt siennas, so not all burnt siennas are created equal depending on the brand. And so, but any burnt sienna is a good place to start, and then you'll add, other colors to balance it out. But you can see, when it's really watered down, which is why I do my color stories like this, is when you look at them watered down, you can see here's some light-skinned people, here are some more medium-toned people that's very orange, so you might want to add in a touch of ultramarine to balance out that orange. But on this one, these medium tones are really nice for brown people. And for really dark-skinned people, I prefer starting with a burnt umber base. You see these rich browns are really great for very dark-skinned people, and then these browns are great for a lot of hair colors. If you're a beginner, I think cold-pressed paper is easier to start with. Cold-pressed paper typically has more texture. You see how textured that paper is? There we go. So cold pressed paper does have a little bit more texture, and it will be easier for you to start with. It is for most people. This is Canson 300 GSM 140 pound paper. And this is a moderately priced, medium quality, really good for beginners paper. This is Arches cold press 300 GSM 140 pound cold press watercolor paper. It is expensive. You should try this when you have done a lot of practice already and are feeling up to using a lot of expensive materials. But you can start with something like the Canson Montval. There's a lot. Canson has different qualities of paper. I also have their more expensive one, but this is a brand, this Montval one, this more moderately priced one, I used to recommend in my classes as kind of a starting point for watercolor paper. You're going to need palettes. So I have a bunch of palettes. This is an $80, I think, porcelain palette monstrosity. This is solid. It's so heavy. And gouache is really great because you can let it dry, and then I'll just use an eyedropper and just put more water on it. Or I have a little spritzer spray that I got from, the travel toiletries aisle at places like Target, and they have those empty spray bottles. I fill that with water, and then I spray my whole dry palette to reactivate all the paints again. Again, not necessities, but just nice things to know. These are plastic palettes that are like 99 cents at the art supply store. They're not good. Okay, they'll do, but they're not good. You know what's better? This one is also porcelain palette. It's really small. I have very specific purposes for this, but again, this is porcelain. It's like the best. You know what you should do is go to the thrift store and get a plate. You can get a bigger one than this. Don't use your mom's dinner plates because you don't want that paint, food contamination, microscopic particles, improper dishwash. Just don't. Okay? All these jars and plates and stuff, they live in my studio. Okay? This is a plain porcelain plate. Do you see how this is kind of flat in the middle? Like there's a lot of dishes where it kind of dips into like a shallow bowl. I like the kind where it's more flat so the paint doesn't just go all over the place. But just pick up some plates at a thrift store. They'll be cheap. They're great palettes. Let's talk about brushes. Again, more food jars. Does everybody want a beautiful set of sable brushes? Almost everybody. Do you need them to paint well? No. This is a faux sable round brush that I've had. I bought this because this was on my college fashion illustration school supplies list. That was 100 years ago. And you just take good care of your brushes and they'll last you forever. And so you don't need every size under the sun either. This is a 12 for large areas. This is a 4 for medium areas. And then I have like a few detail brushes. This one is my favorite. It's a 2 and it does most of the details. You need 3 reasonably priced faux sable watercolor brushes. The end. This is what you need to keep your brushes forever. This is a brush cleaner. This is like, I think the only one in the market that's expressly for paintbrushes. This is fantastic. I use this all the time and it lasts you forever. You just open it up. This is the soap. You put your wet brush in here, swirl it around, the end. These are pliers. Just get any kind of cheap pliers you can find at the tool store. I stole these from my dad 100 years ago. And when these tubes dry up, don't use your teeth to open the tubes. Just use the pliers. Don't use your teeth. This cheap set of pliers at the tool store is way cheaper than a trip to the dentist. And then, like I mentioned before, color pencils for detail work. So this next part of the video is going to be about draping, pattern making, cutting, and sewing tools. First of all, draping. First, you're going to need a dress form. So PGM is pretty good. I have a PGM and it's lasted me a dozen years. Wolf has some sort of contract with all the major fashion schools. They all seem to have Wolf dress forms. Alva, I think, are the ones that look the most like human bodies, followed by Royal. Royal, they have like padding systems so that you can kind of personalize your dress forms as well. So those are some brands to look at. Of course, with draping, you're going to need muslin. Muslin is a cheap, unbleached, undyed cotton basket weave, just simple, plain fabric you use to do your drapes in, your first drapes. You're going to need pins for draping. It doesn't really matter what kind of pins you use. For draping, a lot of people like to use these regular all steel pins so that the look of the pins don't get in the way. Like when I'm working with something like lace, that lace video is coming, the lace sewing video. I like to use something that has a distinct ball on the end because with the busy texture of lace, pins can get lost unless you have something that's really visible like this. Even this is better. This is a silk glass head, very delicate pin, but it has a very distinct head. Whereas this one, it will get lost in lace, but it can be good when you're draping with muslin so that the pins are not getting in the way of the design. So different pins for different uses, but you need some pins. You're going to need a pin cushion. This is something you wear on your wrist. This is from college. And I don't like it because it kind of rubs on my bones a little. It's not my favorite. There are some that have like a more cloth kind of band that are more comfortable, so you can try that. But I don't throw anything away, that's why I still have this. This is a magnet. This is my favorite. Like at the end of the workday, I like run this over my table and pick up all the pins. You need fabric scissors. So you're gonna need a few different pairs of scissors in your sewing box. You're gonna need separate paper and fabric scissors. These are my main fabric scissors. These are very old, and in retrospect, I wish they were a little bit longer, like maybe 1 inch longer, the blade. But when I first got them, they were like, oh, your hands are so small that you would do better with smaller scissors. But they're fantastic. I've had them forever. They work great. I get them sharpened periodically, depending on whether I'm having a busy cutting season or not. But you do need fabric scissors for your muslin. Some people like these kinds of scissors. I got them to test out, and sometimes I'm in the mood for them. These are Fiskars, but basically they're spring-loaded, so they kind of bounce back. And that's why they have the... So it helps people where, like, if my hand is hurting, if I've been using these for a long time and my hands are hurting and my fingers want to be in a different position for a while, then I use these for a while and switch back and forth. Do you need both of them? No, you do not. Just pick one. Again, you're going to need a long ruler that I mentioned before in the video so that you can mark the grain. You want to mark the grain with a marker right on your muslin so that you use the correct grain of the fabric when you're draping. Speaking of pens, pick up a set of pens. You want one red, one green, and one blue or purple. These are Papermate flares. You can also good are the skinny Sharpies. And you're going to use them to mark your muslin as you're draping, and also you're going to need those colors for marking your patterns. When you're making patterns, you mark lining pieces with green, interfacing pieces with red, and contrast pieces with blue and purple. So just get one set, you'll use them for draping, you'll use them for pattern making. You're going to need a measuring tape, and you're going to need twill tape. Now, twill tape, I'm all out of twill tape, which is very annoying, but I'm going to throw up a picture on the screen. And twill tape is a very narrow, about 1/4 inch. They have different widths, but I prefer the 1/4 inch. And it's like a cheap black ribbon that you use to either mark up your mannequin, your dress form, before you put the muslin on to drape. Or if you've made a muslin and you've sewn it up and you're putting it on a fit model, you can use the twill tape to mark out style lines or adjustments that you're going to make to the pattern. And they come in two forms. You can get the fabric ribbon where you pin them on, like you pin the tape onto your dress form or the muslin, or you can get the kind that's literal tape. Okay, now on to pattern making. Of course, you're going to need pencil and eraser. And of course, you're going to want your graph ruler, your long graph ruler. You're going to want a hip curve, and this will help you do long curves like the outseams of pants and skirts. You're going to want a French curve for armholes. And then you're going to need paper. This is dot paper, and these are marked with numbers going one way and little crosses going every other row. So these are 1 inch apart. So if you use the metric system, that's not really helpful other than the fact that you get a grid. So this is what most people use to construct their first patterns. This is oak tag. You can see you can hear it. It's much stiffer paper. And at the very least, you keep your blocks, your pattern blocks on oak tag. So you have your oak tag pattern and then your oak tag block. And then you can trace your oak tag block on a fresh sheet of dot paper and then make adjustments to your block to create the new design pattern. Okay? But the oak tag is not necessary if it's too expensive, because a lot of places you have to buy a whole roll. They won't sell you a few yards. So if that's the case, you can skip this, but you do need some kind of pattern paper. A lot of people use brown craft paper for pattern paper as well. So that's an option. These are my paper scissors. These are my ordinary office scissors, and this will cut this paper just fine. But if you're working on the oak tag, this gets tired really quick. This goes through like butter, okay? I mean, it'll cut through this paper really well too. This is really, so these are heavy duty and on the expensive side, but if you're working with a lot of oak tag, these are fantastic. They're heavy. I don't know, I'm so used to them. I really like them, but again, they're not necessary. What is necessary is that you separate your paper and your fabric scissors. Anybody who's done any kind of pattern making, you're probably familiar with the slash and spread method. I know there are a lot of people who are starting pattern making on software, but I think for the majority of fashion designers, y'all are learning paper and pencil before you move on to software. That's why I'm showing you all these paper pattern making tools. So you're gonna want some magic tape. I like this one, the magic tape, not the transparent tape, not the clear tape, because this is really soft on one side and you can write on it. I like these dispensers that are kind of heavy because it'll double as a fabric weight. And when you're cutting, you want to use fabric weights. Here's an awl, look how sharp that is. And this is for marking, ends of darts or marking tucks on a pattern, that sort of thing. And there's not really any sort of replacement for an awl. It's a one item, one purpose thing that does it well. You also it'll punch through most fabrics as well. So this is a notcher, and you cut notches in your pattern out of it. Can you do it with scissors? Yeah. Is it way faster and easier to do it with a notcher? Yes. If you're super duper broke, can you skip it? Yeah. Okay. Whatever. This is a bunny punch. This weighs 100 million pounds. This is a luxury and not a necessity. But I'm going to show it to you because you'll probably see it in a lot of design studios. Oof. It's like 1,000,000 pounds. Ugh. It's called a rabbit punch, bunny punch, bunny hole punch, rabbit hole punch, because it looks like this. You see how it looks like a bunny? And it's got a massive hole punch here. And you take all of your many paper pattern pieces and you stack them up and you put them in here. And you make a big old hole. And then you take your pattern hook, which looks like this. And you can buy them in bulk by the baggie. And then you loop them through. And then you hang them on your rack. So again, these are not necessary, but they are very convenient. They make life easier, so budget accordingly. You can also take one of your awl holes and just cut a little hole with a pair of scissors. It won't be as nice and neat as this, but again, budget accordingly. All right, so for cutting, of course, you're gonna need your fabric scissors. And there are a few ways you can do this. Some people really like rotary cutters with mats. I don't. That's my preference. Some people like to use tailor's chalk. They like put their pattern pieces down and they like to mark the patterns with a piece of tailor's chalk. Tailor's chalk comes in different colors because you want something that contrasts against the color of the fabric that you're using. So dark colors, I have this yellow, light colors, I have this black, and you're gonna need some fabric weights to hold down the pattern pieces so they don't move while you're marking your fabric. So you can get like bean bags like this. These are pretty heavy. I mentioned before, I have a heavy tape dispenser full of sand. I use this as another paperweight. And then you can also get industrial fabric weights that are big pieces of metal that are flat on the bottom. You can pin, but when you pin, just do keep in mind, pin in the seam allowance so that you're keeping the holes in the seam allowance and not anywhere it would be visible. And I don't know, it's less accurate. So if you want the pins for it to be more stable, like maybe you just pin the corners and then keep the fabric weights where they are. So last but not least, sewing. So you're gonna need a sewing machine, of course. You're gonna need needles and bobbins. So always get the kind of needles and bobbins that match your machine. It's not that difficult. There's industrial bobbins and industrial needles for industrial sewing machines, and home sewing needles, home machine sewing needles, not regular just hand sewing needles, and home bobbins, home machine bobbins for home machines. Okay, so just when you're shopping for them, make sure you're like, oh, I have a home machine, is this for that? I have an industrial machine, is this for that? Okay, of course you're gonna need your pins, fabric scissors. You know, everyone needs a nice pair of small scissors for all these little small jobs. This is my favorite. They're small, they're sharp. Something like these are nice for someone with, you know, more fat fingers, thicker fingers, but I find the blade a little bit too short. But I think they're so friggin' cute. But something like this is cute. Little thread clippers. These are called embroidery scissors. I think these were a gift. These are really nice. They're very sharp. I guess these could double as an awl. And I think these are actually barber scissors, because don't they have this little thing, usually barber scissors? But these are also very nice. Longer than the other scissors, but really nice for small jobs. Some people like those really fast, like you don't even have to put your fingers in it, grab and grow, like thread clippers. But those are just good for one thing. Whereas these scissors, they are great for a multitude of small jobs. So getting, you know, one good pair of fabric scissors, or one good pair of paper scissors, and one good pair of small multi-job scissors are your best bet. I forgot this. This is a tracing wheel. Okay, do you see all these little spikes? Ow. So this is when you have your muslin drape and you want to transfer it to paper. Let's say you have your muslin and here's your line on your muslin and you want to transfer it to your pattern. You put that down and then you trace that. Do you see the little, little holes there? Then you can take your pencil, copy it so that you have your pattern based on your drape. And then on your sewing machine, you have different feet attachments for different projects. But you know, you should learn about different techniques and sewing things before you go out and buy a bunch of feet. So hold off on that. And that's it for today's video. Please do give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today or if you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Yes, a lace sewing video is coming. It is in the works. There's a lot of videos in the works. Everything is in planning stages, all that good stuff. Yeah, so drop me your questions. Check the description box for links to videos that I mentioned in this one, related videos, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next video.